Thank you. As you can see, I came well prepared for the MedTech part of this discussion today. I'm not here by myself. I have 5 very interesting guests, and I would like to welcome them all on stage right now with me so they can introduce themselves to you guys in the audience. Come on up.
Not pleasant.
So, welcome, first of all. Maybe it's good to do a short introduction round for everybody in the audience. To start with David.
Yeah. So my name is David Fernandez Rivas. I'm a professor at the University of Twente and also founder of 2 spin-off companies from the region.
Christoff.
Yeah, I'm Christoff. I am a postdoc at the University of Twente, co-founder of robotics spin-off in MedTech.
Sefora.
Yeah, hi, surprise. I'm also from the University of Twente. My name is Sefora. I'm a PhD student there researching how to co-design e-health technologies with older adults.
I'm the scientific director of the TechMed, also University Twente, for 3 days a week. And 2 days a week, I'm a professor of medical innovation and technology at the Radboud UMC.
You're our last speaker. Not from
and I'm the real surprise, and I think I'm one of those engineers that somehow found his way from India to the Netherlands, and I think my name is Sridhar Kumaraswamy.
Very good.
Thank you for that appreciation. And I'm one of the founders and CEO of Ancora Health, which is a preventive health company.
Thank you guys.
Happy to be here.
Thank you guys for being here as well. We have a very interesting panel. Maybe to start with Maroeska TechMed Center. I think for the most people who are here, it might resonate with them. Could you explain a little bit more what the TechMed Center is?
So the TechMed Center is a center at the institute, actually, at the University of Twente. And we are facilitating the researchers within the faculties working on in the health area and connecting with the outside world, but also the outside world, so entrepreneurs from outside with the inside world. And we also have a very huge teaching area where we have a lot of infrastructure, which then used both for teaching, but also by entrepreneurs like you.
Sridhar.
Yeah, I don't dare to pronounce it because that's why she was saying.
Yes, I tried. But yeah, you guys are all from the University of Twente, so you've been researching or either making your stuff at the TechMed Center as well. You are the CEO of Flux Robotics?
Yeah, that's correct. So Flux Robotics is a spin-off from the University of Twente, and it started with me doing a PhD in 2017, which then crossed over to our hopes to commercialize a surgical robot. And this robot is aimed at making minimally invasive surgeries more efficient through helping the surgeons during their interventions. And we tested that as well in the TechMed Center. Luckily, there's an entire hybrid operating theater that simulates an operating room as it would be in a hospital, and that allowed us to test out our system and to really see the effects of it firsthand.
Can you explain a little bit more about how your system works? Because I think a lot of people might find it interesting, but don't know exactly how it works. Maybe you can put it a little bit into layman's terms how Flux Robotics works.
Of course. So a year ago, we brought the system on this exact stage during Dutch Innovation Days. It was a robot arm, and this arm is holding a magnet, and everyone knows how a magnet works, right? And we use this magnet to position disposable tools in your body, in your blood vessels, which makes it much easier for the surgeon, so they don't have to try and control it with their hands. So the magnet can just automatically position it where it needs to go. Think in terms of a GPS through your arteries. And in this way, the surgeon saves a lot on time and mental effort during the surgery. So that makes the surgery much shorter. And if you have a surgery that is shortened as much as, say, 50%, automatically for us, the patients, the outcome is much better.
Yeah, and also you said it's minimally invasive, so you don't need any large openings in your body, no infection risks.
One small cut on the body that reduces the invasiveness of the procedure, reduces your blood loss, chances of infection, and that I could see is where robotics will lead us towards future healthcare, is really to ensure a minimally invasive approach in all surgical disciplines.
Hey, we were talking minimally invasive. You recently also put an innovation on the market which would classify as minimally invasive, I think, the bubble gun?
Yes.
Yes? Maybe for everybody in the audience who might have any kind of comical interpretations now of a bubble gun, can you explain what your bubble gun is about?
Yes. So, well, what we're trying to do is to inject without needles. And we are doing that by changing the concept of injecting large volumes, which is the common way of injecting nowadays. What we're trying to do is to have small droplets penetrating in between the space that your cells have on the skin. And then instead of going so deep into the muscle, for example, we are trying to inject only the superficial layers. And we do that by using a bubble, therefore the name of the bubble gun. So there's a tiny bubble that we create with a small laser. And then when the bubble grows, pushes the liquid, and then the liquid forms the droplets that then can be medicine, but could also be ink for medical tattooing and other applications. So that is in a nutshell what bubble gun is aimed at.
And how should I visualize a bubble gun, just for me? So usually you're used to having a doctor walk in or a nurse with a syringe. How would a treatment with a bubble gun look like? Well,
that's a very interesting question, which as scientists, we typically are not concerned on what would be the embodiment or how it would look as a product. So one side anecdote related to what we face when we put out into society these ideas is some person left a comment in one of the websites that we have, say, I'm terrified by needles, but I'm also terrified by lasers. So it's like sometimes we think that we're solving a big problem or we're creating a new one. So we have to think carefully once we have the technology ready to have, commercial, appeal. For some applications, for example, diabetes patients, they are not afraid of a needle. So if it looks a bit scary, they are brave enough. No? But when you're going to inject kids, maybe the same technology needs to be wrapped up differently. So right now I could tell you the way I envisage it is like thermometers we use now to measure the temperature of kids. They look relatively funny. They don't really look like a gun to kill somebody. So that's also the choice in the name. Bubble gun is the scientific project name, but one day we hope to come with a more peaceful name for the product.
That would be very nice. But does it also, because it's minimally invasive as well, it doesn't include penetrating the skin with a needle, does it also reduce pain of an injection?
Well, that's what we hope. We have done some tests in a small number of volunteers. They haven't felt anything, but to really generalize is a bit premature. If you want to compare with something that I think most of you have experienced is a mosquito bite, you typically don't feel when the mosquito is really pushing through your skin. What you feel is the poison or what is left behind. But there's a bigger advantage that I'm trying to highlight, and I think the audience might want to learn about it, is that by reducing the usage of needles, we may reduce the amount of energy that we need to sterilize a needle, but also once you use a needle, you need to dispose it properly. So there's a big footprint that the health system has nowadays, that if we can innovate, already having in mind how to minimize that impact, then we have a better solution. Not only the pain, not only the fear, because not everybody's afraid, not everybody has pain, but everybody's concerned with contamination. So that's one of our biggest focus.
Definitely, and the panel I did before here was about on circular technologies and reusing stuff, and of course needles. I don't think you can even sterilize needles. Can you?
Well, depending on the needle, you can reuse some. Some needles is cheaper to dispose. Some companies are creating needles that can only be used once, because in some less developed areas it's a big problem when needles are reused, because you can create bigger diseases that should not be propagated that way. And so some needles, for example, for blood extraction and stuff like that, in some countries I know is sterilized and reused, but well, that's a big challenge.
But it's also a very interesting way of looking at medical technologies, because I remember from just a few years back that they were still trying to make as much disposable medical treatment devices. Do you think that's going to, maybe for Maroeska, do you think that's going to change in the coming years, that we'll see a transition from reducing the amount of disposable medical innovations to more?
They still
circular?
are, because I think that's the business model. That's why they use reusables, and only in the Africa and the more southern part, as we call it, they reuse But yes, it will change. I think it will be, well, Frans Timmermans was also mentioned in the last panel. But I think the EU is working also, the MDR, and I'm not the two entrepreneurs or the three, because there's a lot of pitfalls, but I think it's also an easy way to say something about making more usables. But at the moment, disposables is the business model for many companies. It still is.
To touch on something that isn't a product, or maybe not as much as a physical product, e-health. That's your proficiency, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so e-health can be a physical product. It can be an app, it can be a physical product. E-health just means electronic health. So it means telehealth, which is remote healthcare, providing remote healthcare. It means mHealth, which is mobile healthcare, which means an app. It can be like anything which is electronic. And I'm focusing on designing this for older adults, because we know that more and more people become older and older, but becoming older means also more chronic health conditions. So how can we prevent that? We can't give everybody a trainer or someone at home that supports them. So we think, hey, digital can be the solution. And this can be, for example, through an app that coaches you. This can be through a website that gives you information. This can be through a product that, for example, a flower that grows when you run a mile, something like that. Something that motivates you. And that's what e-health is at the moment. But looking at 2049, I think that good design is invisible, and I think that e-health will become invisible. So as you said, it's not a physical product anymore, but it will provide us with a health experience or a health journey where technology accompanies us throughout our day without us noticing. So maybe I'm wearing a smartwatch, and already, like a smartwatch is already e-health, a Fitbit or something, and it will maybe have sensors that we can't think about right now, and intelligence behind it, like AI is on the rise like so much at the moment. It will become so intelligent and recognize patterns of diseases that we can't notice right now in a stage that's so early that we can prevent it. So that's what I hope in 2049 to be reality.
I think it's really nice. And I think, Sridhar, I saw you nodding a couple of times, because we're shifting a little bit more from a curative side to a preventive side, which is more your specialty, right?
Absolutely, and I do get very excited about it. So, so I was nodding to everybody, but my nodding got stronger as it was passed on. Now, I think two things, right? So I founded Ancora Health, and that's because I quit my career in a senior leadership role in Philips, and I started up Ancora Health mainly because of two things, right? So one has to do with this broader transition, which we could clearly see happening from healthcare to health, right? And I think that shift is happening, and it is now embedded in the context of ESA and GALA and all of those kind of initiatives in the policy-making circles. Number two is the enthusiasm of two medical doctors. At this point of time, back then they were students at the Medical Centrum in Groningen, and their commitment towards actually prevention and the fact that healthcare needs to change, right? So this is what made me start together with them Ancora Health, which is a digital health platform which does a few things. I think to borrow what Sefora said, so it's a set of digital tools that enables you to collect data, analyze data, but analysis with an intention to actually stratify risks for a range of chronic conditions, predict who's likely to slip into a chronic condition, and then use that assessment to actually launch individuals into very specifically curated behavioral pathways, right? We've broken down the macro behavioral health parameters, eat healthy, move more, manage your stress better, get extra hours of sleep, down to more than 150 micro habits, and then think in terms of contextual as well as personally relevant moments in which we could actually deliver prompts so that they end up acquiring this micro habit, whether it is in terms of understanding portion sizes or how to actually engage in a low intensity a walk or a swim at an appropriate point of time, and their weekly schedules. And the last bit that we actually do is we actually blend it with either a clinical standard care pathway where there is a clinical team that looks at the parameters and intervenes at an appropriate point of time, or we actually deploy health coaches. So there is this blending between the human dimension and the machine. And I think in a certain fundamental way, I think 2049, you mentioned something about it, and I think there is this famous thing about how AI is going to be coming together with people. So and I think we deploy a fair amount of AI in terms of looking deeper into people, both their biology and behavior. Our view is very simple. Everybody, it's not going to be humans versus machines. It's humans that use machines versus humans. I think it's people that use the tools and technology will replace people that don't use it. And I think that's where the challenge is going to be, how to make it equitable, how to get everybody to embrace what is happening, and how to actually make sure that we're all prepared for what is going to change.
Yes.
No, I'll stop there.
No, I think it's good because it's a subject that we already touched on in I won't call it preparation of this meeting, but our meeting downstairs is we can push technology, we can design technology, we can invent a lot of amazing stuff, but how do we encourage people to change behaviors and how to use it? I think that's a more interesting question. And I don't know how, because you both, I would consider you more of the tech guys over here, not to put eHealth not on tech, but you're making products. How do you see this change? How do you see your products change the way people are going to use MedTech solutions?
Well, I think something that I was also speaking yesterday here on the same podium is a tool that not only inventors but doctors and almost any professional could start using. Is about empathy. So we might be working on a problem or a technical challenge, and if we every now and then try to connect, like how is this technology eventually, maybe in 50 years or maybe 3 years, going to be used by not only the patient receiving the treatment, but if there's a doctor or a nurse applying the treatment, having this in the back of your head, this empathic element, like is this going to improve pain, or is it going to improve or reduce cost? Mm-hmm. That can help already pave the way for a new innovation to be well received. Because if you only focus on cost or a profit, then you might have a beautiful, very efficient machine, but looks scary, you know, like the laser and the whole thing. Then you're not going to solve the problem. I know for a good source that they already have a good technology demonstrated, and then the roadblock is the nurses applying the procedure don't feel like they win anything. So why should they retrain themselves after 20 years of practice? They know they're doing their job well. Why they should learn now a new technology that doesn't represent any win for them? So yes. that is the main idea, using empathy towards everybody, every stakeholder in the value chain.
I think that's very important, using stakeholders, because I think that's where your eHealth solution, because you were saying you were focusing on elderly adults, elderly patients, you asked about their needs and try to pinpoint some technologies to help them reach their goal of not feeling so lonely anymore. Is that correct?
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's a project that I was working on. So my focus especially is lonely older adults. What I did, so I don't think people can solve loneliness by themselves, because that's the whole problem, right?
Yeah.
So they need support. And a really cool approach to involve stakeholders is citizen science. I'm also a Design Lab research fellow, which is also part of the university, and the Design Lab focuses on citizen science. And citizen science means to include everybody in society in the research process. So what I did to find a solution was to invite, for example, all the readers of the local newspaper to respond to an article that we published. We were on the front page and provide some prompts and a story about a lonely older adult. And we asked them, hey people, how do you feel about this and how would you solve this? Like, what is your approach on it? And through that, you can include people that do feel strong about this topic, that you normally would not contact and you normally would not listen to. So you don't stay in your bubble and you don't like choose a specific, even if you involve several stakeholders that are always the same people that then respond. But now you have the insights of so many different people, and then we read stories, like they come up with stories, fictional stories about how they would solve it. And we read through those, and then in the end we came up with a light. So a lamp to solve loneliness, and this sounds crazy, like how can a lamp solve loneliness? But through involving their perspectives, we noticed the lamp can provide a support system. The lamp can show warmth. The lamp represents the social presence. The lamp is so easy to integrate in the home. Like all these things that you would never think of can combine the different needs of the people. So I think involving stakeholders and also using empathy and approaches like design thinking or citizen science is so important in the development of e-health technology. And it will provide us with products that people will use, because now we really know what they want. Asking them directly will not help, but appealing to their emotions and understanding their needs and through values will allow us to come up with things that will be used. Yeah.
I think that's what we discussed also earlier, that by including people in your design process and seeing if people will actually use the technology, the adherence to the technology will also be much larger, because it's not some new kind of technology that you're just throwing over a wall with like, hey, I made a machine, I made a robot, please use it and please cure people. Yeah. So I think involving stakeholders is very important also in MedTech development.
Can I add something else?
Yes.
Because I completely agree, you have to start there and involve all stakeholders from the beginning, but I think what all of you also need is that we need some real transformation. Mm-hmm. Because just involving them is still, particularly for the two of you, in the more preventive way, we don't pay for prevention. Mm-hmm. For the two guys over there, we have a lot of add-ons, but often it's not substitution, indeed, because surgeon still wants to use the old days, so it's an add-on, and we still do the old things. Yeah. So, and particularly for prevention, it's even a larger challenge, in my opinion, because in the Netherlands we pay for what we do, and other countries say, well, we do not pay for prevention up front.
Yeah, I think, look, and I was triggered a lot when you were actually mentioning what you mentioned, and I think, just two observations, I think, from my side. I'm in principle very neutral when it comes to material solutions to problems of the aged. So I actually have parents who are pretty aged, and I'm 6,000 kilometers or 8,000 kilometers away from them. I understand a thing or two about what it means to feel lonely and interact with people that feel somewhat lonely. I think a broader shift needs to happen. If we really want to take prevention seriously, this is my second thing, that as you age, that they will become frail, that they will actually be diseased with multimorbid conditions, and that they will be socially isolated, and assuming that that's the default pattern of life, and preparing the whole society to cope with millions of people like that, there is something dumb about it, to be really honest. And I think, I don't know, I'm not so sure that preparing healthcare and preparing innovation for such an eventuality is a very human way of approaching it. Humans have far better solutions to those problems, are capable of far better solutions to those problems. But yeah, as a coping mechanism, we need to provide solutions to people who are going through it right now, but equally we need to prevent masses of people becoming 80, frail, diseased, isolated, without employment, sitting and waiting for their grandchildren to call them once in 3 months. No, can't be.
True.
Just to...
No, call your parents often. No, but I think it's one of the challenges that healthcare is facing, and either if it's preventive healthcare or curative healthcare. But I think also because there's a lot of innovations being done right now, and you already mentioned it's going to be a long road for you guys to be on market. Market introduction is a very difficult process for a medical device. Yeah. Can you explain a little bit to people how long it takes to actually develop something that you think could save lives?
Yeah, I think generally we always tend to overpromise in these cases because ambition comes in the way, right? You're really ambitious about a new technology that you know holds promise. And if you look on average, these things can take anything from 5 to 10 years even to reach the market if you plan everything properly. So my point is that you should start by understanding what are the regulatory requirements, what are the clinical requirements, not necessarily develop something without, like everyone mentioned here, approaching the end users first. Involve the surgeons and doctors at first, because that will save a lot of this time. I've heard of startups which it's unfortunate that many startups are so immersed in the new product that they develop that they never end up actually asking people that will end up using it, hey, what do you think about this? Is this useful? And to save us on those years, we immediately talk first to the surgeon, say, first of all, what is your problem? Like, what is a challenge that you face? Instead of saying, this is the technology, what can it help you solve? What problem can this help you solve? And once you identify that, you essentially can start with what your expertise, where your expertise lies, and then build something that actually solves that problem. And through the process, involve them in iterating. It's called a co-design process. So even getting feedback like, hey, I don't like this push button. I want rather something that I can turn, or give me something that is like 1.5 meters higher, or they actually give you advice in that front, and then you can really say, okay, let's change it, let's change the design. And that for me saves a lot on these few years extra. And I think another point is what is important is regulatory requirements. So you have to know which region you want to enter. One example is called an FDA 510K route, which is, say, a regulatory body in the US that allows you to certify devices much sooner if there's something on the market that exists that is similar, that has a similar influence on the human body. Many MedTech startups, they just go for the de novo route, or just totally go towards the EU MDR, which I have nothing against, but let's be honest, it's a bit of a mess up right now with regards to how many trials and hurdles you have to overcome to actually get your product on the market. So knowing what regulatory options there are for you, tailored for your product, I think that will also help save a lot on time.
Definitely, yeah. I have to say it was a trick question of mine, because I'm a QA and RA, or Quality Assurance and Regulatory Affairs engineer myself. I used to be. So I wrote my entire thesis about the problems that the MDR imposes on us as manufacturers as well. Yeah. Because you have such a big shift. You have a regulatory notion now that provides you with the steps you have to take. And I think we're always in the squeeze between, you have these really innovative ideas, and you also have to deliver all the documentation. You have to walk the path towards a decent product. You have to do the trials, and of course, you have to do them because you want to provide a safe product.
Yeah, but I think what is important for those busy with innovations is trying to look at it not as a roadblock, but as something that is there to make sure we have the safest possible solution to the patient. Because if we rush sometimes innovation, we are very enthusiastic about as technology defenders, but we also need to, protect the humans that are going to be on the other end of our invention.
Eventually, it's all about safety, right?
Yeah, safety, but also guaranteeing some quality and also reproducibility.
Reliability.
Reliability as well.
And also liability, as we know now has happened for a big Dutch firm. I think we need to probably lower the swords. So it's not a fight. It's not. They are not there avoiding you to get to the market. So if you change the perspective and the approach and trying to find the right partnering, then some of these innovations that can take even 20, 25 years. It also is a question of money. Sometimes with the right amount of money, you can move a bit faster. So it's a very delicate balance between regulatory, political, and also societal perception. Because, for example, now the vaccines that many people got during the pandemics, the technology existed already for like 25 years. But, the lobby and, the people were not so welcoming for this type of vaccines. And then society pushed for it, demanded it at different instances, and then we got the vaccines in record time.
Yeah. The thing that I would like to add is it's not how taxing a regulatory regimen is, as long as it is transparent, right? And if you know ex ante what you need to go through, and it is from the standpoint of safety and reliability, and it is good for all of us to go through it. And I think as an entrepreneur who wants to put a product or a service out there in the market and serve a customer, make money with it, I think it's possible that the rest of the society can just say, go through it, right? And that's it. But where it becomes tricky is two ways. One, there is a certain degree of arbitrariness, right? And I think, and that can frustrate the hell out of people. Okay, and we all know there is a Dutch system and there is a German system, and at least as an Indian, I see it in e-health. The German system, they were slow, but it's very transparent. Okay, and the Dutch system seems a bit arbitrary, just to be very clear. And I think this doesn't mean the Dutch have not been pioneering the innovations in many ways, lifestyle interventions, digital innovations, including what is actually happening in TechMed Center, by far the most advanced in terms of e-health research within Europe. I think all of that is happening, but what is preventing that from translating into real benefits for society? There is a certain degree of arbitrariness and negotiating things down. And
How can we solve it?
Well, I think it's deep in the society, right? To act when there is an extra constitutional authority powerful enough standing up and saying, I want to be part of the equation, the constitutional authority and whatever it is should say, nope, you're out of the equation. And it doesn't happen that easily in the Dutch system. The default culture is to involve them and have a dialogue. And I think that's a third party perspective as an Indian, but you have to go through what you have to go through, right? And I think, but that's the point. That's where I actually see the real challenge for Dutch innovations.
Yeah.
And one more point is, like, there are innovations which does not have to clear regulations, and there is abysmal track record on the point of people, i.e. businesses that are in healthcare, in not taking leadership to deploy. Like, for instance, everything is there in terms of technology and innovation to get rid of the keyboard from a doctor's office. So now I want to see one hospital, one clinic, one business saying, my mission is to get rid of this keyboard before the end of this decade from all the clinicians' office. It is there. Everything is there. And I think clinicians will be jumping up and down and saying, exactly, this is what I want. Okay? And it will be lowering burden of care, and it will be saving costs. It will be doing a lot of wonderful stuff. Lack of business, institutional entrepreneurship. Okay, I'll leave it there. That's not regulation.
No, but it's again revolving back to the topic of including your stakeholders, and depending on the case, you still have to include those relevant stakeholders to make a change. And I think change is what we all want to make here on this stage.
But can I add, because this is about 2049, it's the end of the century, I hope.
End of the decade.
End of the decade, okay.
Because that's already there, Maroeska.
It always there, but I think both of you said two important things. The question is, will the MDR be there in 2049? If not, I don't think we can even imagine how it look like. You tried to sketch it a bit at the beginning of this session, how it might look like, and I think but I think we can even not imagine. The question is, will we still have an MDR, and how will it look like? And I think, and you said it, David, we need a crisis to change it. We saw it with COVID-19. The crisis was not deep enough, because now we're going back to some things. You cannot have an online appointment. You have to go back to the hospital sometime, because then they earn more money. Exactly. Business model.
Yes, that's the business model.
So the question is, and I think with the staffing crisis, with the climate crisis you had in the other, something will happen, and we don't know what will happen, but I don't think
you need a crisis to solve it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I think as well.
actually meant digital health solutions were compensated without being asked any questions. COVID-19 disappearing made arbitrary rules come in. Back.
Yes,
exactly.
Back. They returned just as quickly as they came.
No questions asked. Anything was. And in the statements of some of the institutions, it's even written, if it were to return, we will actually compensate again.
So it's strange to say, but the crisis was not deep enough. So the staffing crisis and the climate, but it seems we need something like that to make people aware.
Because a crisis a crisis is never like a positive thing that happens to us. So what would we need in a positive way to make these changes without having a crisis? Is there a way to change this without having a crisis?
I have a potential solution. I don't know if the audience wants to chip in.
Everybody get your phones out, because this will be a world-breaking solution.
Well, I mean, it's why I'm still professor at the university, even though I get invitations or pushed like to go more into industries. Like, we need to educate. So the decisions that need to be made are in the classroom. I mean, the people making the big choices are now in the classroom, and not necessarily younger. No, I also invite people who are already mid-career. There are ways to re-educate ourselves. So we need all as society to change the way we are thinking and looking at health, micro habits, different tools, how we interact with technology. No, 20 years ago, the phone was something different. Now we use it for so many different things. So we need to have a bit more a flatter approach and interaction, and learn and be aware of this sort of crises. No? We need to start teaching those young professionals that modulated crisis can give us opportunities. So educating I think is the only way. It's going to take a while. I hope not 20 years, but that's something that has to be also homogenized, maybe starting from Europe, so that worldwide eventually there's a common agreement on how to provide health care.
Yeah, and then also probably how they adapt to it, right? How easy they are to accept to use new technologies in their daily routines. Because I can imagine that if it's anything like what we experience with not necessarily older surgeons or more surgeons that have been trained to do a specific thing, to have a specific vision and way and habits on which they approach their daily job. And if you can already at an earlier stage say, well, like you say, train them to be aware of these technologies, to use it in their daily lives, to even themselves come up with solutions on how to implement it. That surgeons and let's say physicians, they are also innovators in a way, and really pique their interest in a creative manner. I think the adoption would then be much easier than what it is now, at least.
I think it's very good.
Yeah, I
think.
think.
And what's long? Last thing.
Yeah, last thing. I think we're talking about it as if it's not happening, but I think it's happening already. I think the new generation, like, I'm not that old, but still, I have a daughter now. She's 1 year, and how she's using my phone, it's not normal. Like, she immediately knows how to use it, and I think they're so much more flexible. They have like access to a completely different world, and they're entirely changing the way they interact with technology, the way they're learning technology, their priorities, what they want to achieve. We had in a previous panel you were talking about whether you want 10 times more return on investment or 3 times and more impact. And I think that's like also the new mindset of the people. And I think it's already happening. So in 20, 30 years, the world will be entirely different, and the people will have so many different priorities, and just accept and, appreciate the new things coming and use them much faster. The world will change so much. It will be crazy, I think.
I think I couldn't have given a better wrap-up or a takeaway message for everybody in the audience. I want to thank all of you very much for being on this stage, and I would like to have you continue your works. I think you're doing amazing jobs, and thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening as well.
Cool. Thank you very much for such an interesting panel. Do you want people to give people a chance to ask one question?
If people have questions.
We have time for one question. If anyone wants to ask.
Please do.
Yes? No one? Michiel? Okay. You ready?
So we never got the answer why the panel was called 2049. We all want to know.
Yeah, good question to the panel. No one knows? We can also keep it a secret.
I also want to know, actually. We were discussing it beforehand, but...
I have the same question. I thought you guys were going to give me the answer. I didn't ask the question, that's my problem as well. No, but I
was thinking about a project for Lowlands. We called it 2051. We thought it's slightly more futuristic than One Down, but I don't know it either. But I think it's also hopeful not to make it the next century indeed, but within it will... probably has to do, it will change so fast, how fast will it go, and then have a sort of in between. But not a real answer.
We can just say that it is a secret that we'll keep on the stage. Yeah. We don't have to say that we don't know why it is 2049. Cool. Thank you so much.